The Lord Mayor of London was in Kenya early September with a delegation of investors. What kind of deals were struck and what's the worth of these deals?
So what I think is striking about the Lord Mayor's visit is it's the largest delegation she has ever travelled with. There were nearly 30 people, it was about 25 companies, and it was a new wave of investment of Britain in Kenya. You know that Britain, you've heard me say before, we're the largest cumulative investor in Kenya, the largest export market outside East Africa. We have the 5 largest taxpayers in Kenya, the 2 largest employers. So our trade links are actually still very, very close. But this was even more. The figure you asked about, on her visit, we agreed £100 million of new investment, so that's about 15 billion Kenyan shillings of new investment. And that was largely in financial services, obviously a great area of expertise for the City of London, in energy deals, a very important part of Vision 2030, and in aviation and in healthcare.
Christian, talking of the number of exports, because you did allude to that, the value of exports that we saw Kenya exporting to the UK was about 37 billion shillings. Imports, on the other hand, were about 49 billion shillings. Not too big a difference as we've seen with other markets. What are the plans that you have in place to show up these numbers?
So your point is very important, that the balance of trade is pretty equal, and that's healthy and that's good, and I like that, and I would like, as we grow the overall basket, to see that equality maintained. And you're right, for other countries it's quite differential, and that is less advantageous to Kenya. So it plays to this point on adding value back into the Kenyan economy. Overall, last week's visit is just one step in a plan to ever further expand this new wave of investment. There is a large investment conference in London at the end of October for a whole pile of African countries, and I handed over to His Excellency the President an invitation. And I've said on record before that I would like to see our bilateral trade double. So if you put those two figures together, you've got not far shy of 100 billion of bilateral trade. I would like to see that double in the next 4 or 5 years.
The Kenyan government had said that they are going to engage with the Western governments that have issued travel advisory in the wake of insecurity, which of course has affected tourism as a sector. Have you heard from the Kenyan government, and what is the general view with that regard?
Well, I think the first point to say is that the travel advice is issued for one reason alone, and that's a security assessment. There is nothing economic or political in that advice. The second thing I would like to say is to be very, very clear that our advice is not against the whole country. In fact, it's only against a very small part of the country, 2 specific locations, Mombasa Island and Lamu. We have had frequent and regular dialogue with the Kenyan government about it, about the work we are doing together to make Kenya ever more secure and to fight the threat, the scourge of terrorism. The impact of the travel advice is just as much on British interests and British businesses as it is on Kenyan, so I would like nothing more than to see those advisories lifted. At heart, though, it is not the travel advice which causes economic damage. It is the insecurity which leads to travel advice.
Britain is still a very key source market for Kenya with regards to tourism. But if you look at the numbers in the last 5 years, Christian, it looks like the numbers are shrinking, they're dwindling. What is the reason behind this?
It's a very good question. I think it's important because the drop in numbers from the figures I've seen actually started in about 2011. And by the time the travel advice came into effect, actually they were already, as you have just said, very, very low. There were clearly concerns about political stability around the election, concerns which we're all delighted did not come to pass. I think Westgate, inevitably appearing on people's TV screens across the world, scared some tourists away, even though actually we did not change our advice for Nairobi after Westgate, stayed exactly the same. I think, if I'm honest, there is also something about the market offer which the tourism sector here is offering. And I'm quite excited about new opportunities for tourism in Kenya, diversifying some of the offer. I think there is great scope for more adventure tourism, people who are coming in want to be more active in the north of the country. On the coast, I think more use of water sports, and there are things I think to diversify the offer. And I know that Phyllis Candier is looking quite hard at conference tourism. So there are other ways in which the market can mature and compete with other competitors in Africa and elsewhere to attract those tourists.
There has been talks with regards to Kenya, and not just Kenya, even other African governments facing East as opposed to the traditional relation that we had with the West. For you, what's the general view on this?
First point is that this is a globalized world. You know, the era where one company is competing with another on a national basis is long gone. Most of the businesses you saw coming with the Lord Mayor, they've got global links. If you're putting together a consortium to work on a big part of the lapset infrastructure, that is going to have representatives from all over the world. British businesses, I hope, will benefit as part of that, but it's not this binary east-west choice. It's a multipolar world, and the days of that sort of competition, you know, that's 100 years old. So it's just it's intellectually, it's a faded mindset to think like that. I think the other point I would say is it doesn't really reflect the reality of the economy. The points you have raised with me about the balance of trade, about the still very, very close trade links between Britain and Kenya, the idea that somehow China is eating Britain's breakfast in Kenya, even if I like the competitive nature of that, which I don't, doesn't reflect the hard data which you have cited.